Welcome to the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders webinar on ensuring equitable access to great teachers and leaders. This is Garrett, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. Before, I'd like to orient you to the WebEx platform and how we'll be using it for today's webinar. For our right-hand side of your screen, you see the chat box. Because of the size of today's webinar, we're going to be using this chat box to communicate with participants. They will remain muted. If you scroll to the bottom, you'll send messages to the host, teachers, all attendees, all panelists using the chat box, and to do so by sending your messages to all panelists. Please send your message to all attendees or the presenters will not receive it. And also please do not send messages to the host only or we might miss your message. Several questions to gauge your, to get feedback from you all on this issue. We'd like to start by using a polling question just to who we have on this webinar. To automatically see it, at the bottom of your screen on the right, there's a blue ribbon that says polling, and just go there to open it up. So this is your role. Just click on the circle that best represents your organization, be it SEA, Regional Center, an Equity Assistance Center, Technical Assistance Mission, or another organization. And one that best represents your organization, on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a Submit button. Just on that. Pull. Okay, and see the results. Okay, technical difficulty. Oh, they are then. Okay, so looks like we have a presentation from technical assistance organizations, a few regional centers represented, a few state education agencies, and some folks from other organizations. And that a number of individuals were not able to answer that question. I'm noting that some people are still coming in early, so coming in a little bit late. So that's fine. But those of you who have joined us a few minutes late, this is the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders webinar on ensuring equitable access to great teachers and leaders. I'm Ellen Sherritt, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. So if you poll, that's fine, but please go ahead and write in the chat box is what organization you represent and any other information that you think would be helpful for us to know about your interest in this topic of equitable access so that we have information. We'll now with the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Manici, the Director of the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders, to introduce the topic and the agenda for today's webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you again for making time out of your busy day to talk to us about the Excellent Educators for All initiative and the work that we're doing at the Center to help support regional and state education agencies in this particular arena. So for you, I think most of you who are on this webinar are very familiar with the Center, but for those of you who are not familiar with the Center, we are a federally funded content center dedicated to really supporting regional centers and state education agencies in their work to improve educator quality. And one of the things that we have a couple of objectives for today's webinar, and we'd like to share with you today basically some of the resources and materials and technical assistance that we've been putting together to help regional centers and states as states begin to think about the equity planning process and putting their equity plans together. And you can see this reflected in our agenda. So spending some time talking about the Excellent Education for All initiative and some of the materials that we put together. The other objective we really have for this webinar is we want to share with you what we think we've been, some of the things that we've been putting together so far, based on our experience doing this work previously as the TQ Center, but also on what we anticipate or know are going to be some of the requirements that will be in state equity plans. But we do want to spend some time hearing from you on this webinar about what other kinds of assistance do you need. So you'll hear us talk a lot about what we're developing already, but we really want to spend some time, particularly at the end, just to stop and say, are these the right kinds of resources? What other things should we be thinking about? So with that, I am going to, if we can move on to the overview of Excellent Educators for All initiative, I'm going to actually pass it over to my colleague Janice Poda, who is going to talk about this initiative. And again, for those of you who also may not know, we have two fantastic partners that work with us at the Center, CCSSO and Public Impact, and we anticipate working very closely together to support regional centers and states as we go through the equity planning process. So with that, Janice, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about the initiative, the history behind it, and our current understanding of what states are going to be required to do this time around.
Thanks, Angela, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. And as Angela said, CCSSO is really pleased to be a partner with the GTL Center and to work on this important topic. And just to give a little bit of background, some of you may remember back around 2005, 2006, that states were asked to submit equity plans, and the plans were based on the No Child Left Behind Act and specifically the highly qualified teacher requirements. And the U.S. Department of Education had a peer review process that they put in place and gave feedback to states about those plans. And since that time, there hasn't really been a lot of discussion about the plans or a lot of activity in most places around the equity plans and what states have been doing with those. And so on July the 7th of this year, Secretary can send out a letter to all chief state school officers, and in the letter he indicated that there would be a requirement that states submit a comprehensive plan that would include root causes and also strategies for addressing those, as well as using server engagement to be able to get input from all those that would be affected by those plans. And so since that time, GTL Center has been working with the U.S. Department of Education. We've had a number of conversations with them about this work, and in particular about some of the requirements that would be included in the plans that states would have to submit. And one of the things that we just learned about a week ago is that the deadline that was originally in April has been moved to early June, and so that gives states a little bit more time to work on these plans. And we think that that's going to be helpful, especially with the upcoming election and some of the changes that will result from that. And specifically, the department is going to put out some FAQs that will guide states, and also some equity profiles, some data profiles that will give states some information from the Office of Civil Rights that they have collected. In most cases, that data comes directly from school districts and not from states. And it gives them a summary of that information that they can use as they're thinking about what metrics will be the most useful to them as they identify where the inequities are, and then to determine the root causes and the strategies to address those. So we have been working with a group called the Educator Equity Support Network that is currently being formed to help states from the U.S. Department of Education and to look at ways that they can assist with the development of these plans. So along with that Equity Support Network, CSSO, GTL, and our other partner, Public Impact, will be discussing plans with you for technical assistance we have going forward. We believe that this is a great opportunity for states to look at their human capital systems in a comprehensive way and to think about how they can use this plan to bring together a lot of the different plans that they have been working on over the last few years as we move into the evaluations and the new information that states have been working on. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Angela.
So we're going to start the kind of getting into the heart of the webinar here by discussing some of the content or some of the things that we think states are going to need to address in their equity plans. And so again, this is, you just heard Janice talk about the history of this initiative with, kind of our best thinking or best understanding of what's going to be required by the Department of Education. And we think that there are some critical elements that will need to be thinking about as they write their equity plan. And we're going to start with these critical elements first because we will some of the technical assistance and the materials that we've developed that will address a lot of these different critical elements. So this time around, states will be asked to involve stakeholders in the process of developing and writing their equity plans. So we think that in the plans it'll be important to talk about that process as well as to talk about how key stakeholders really inform the plan itself and how you'll continue to leverage their involvement around implementation to address a definition of teacher quality. And here it will be selecting metrics or measures that you're going to use to both assess equitable access as well as talk about progress forward. Also need to think about a theory of action or why inequitable access exists and how the state will tackle that. What is its theory on the best way to resources and strategies and supports and to improve equitable access? As well, you heard Janice mention a root cause analysis. So every state is different in region, and it may even be down to the LEA level. What are some of the root causes of inequitable access? In relationship to that, once you identify root causes, we think states will need to identify strategies for addressing root causes of inequitable access and also ways to measure progress towards improving equitable access. And finally, the other critical element which we anticipate states will need to address in their equity plan is the state's role in terms of monitoring and supporting LEAs in improving equitable access. So these kind of critical elements are the things that we think that states will need to address, equity plans themselves. And now we're going to talk about some of the technical assistance that we've been preparing in anticipation of these states needing to address these critical elements.
Before that, we'd like to pause again and review once more on the elements of the plan that you anticipate being most challenging for your state or the states that you work with. So if you just click A through F as to which elements you will be most challenging, you can actually only click once, so just click the element that you think will be most challenging, and then hit the Submit button at the bottom. We'll give the folks about 20 seconds to complete the poll. Okay, close the poll about 5 seconds now. Okay, so we can see that there are the challenges in each areas, but especially with the root cause analysis, as well as strategies for achieving objectives and accompanying performance measures. Great, so thank you. Now move on to describe our technical assistance materials.
So this is Angela again, and I'm just going to very briefly go over this, and then we'll move into more specifically some of the tools and resources that we have. Just to kind of orient us to why we're talking through this today, I think so everyone on the call knows that, of course, we're available for follow-up after this to really walk you through these resources more comprehensively. I know we're going to share many different tools and resources and technical assistance approaches now. So just know, off the bat that we can walk you through these resources much more comprehensively. Basically, the other thing that we'd like, again, as I talked about at the beginning, the other thing that we'd really like to be able to do is to get a sense of whether or not these resources, technical assistance, seems like you're going to need in order to write your equity plans or for states to write their equity plans. So we do want to hear from you at the end if there are some areas that you think, based on your experience or based on your own state, that you know is an area that you're going to need technical assistance, and we'd like to start thinking about how to support you in that way. Again, the center is available to provide direct technical assistance, as we have done in ways. I'll talk about what that can look like, but again, we will customize that with your regional center or your states to provide that technical assistance. We can review state equity plans and provide some friendly feedback as a critical friend. Janice is going to talk to you later on in the webinar about convening states. We'd like to do some convenings to strategies, also help with the planning process. And we have some resources that we'll share today that we anticipate being able to use either in direct technical assistance, or these can be tools and resources that regional centers or states can use themselves as well. A couple of areas that we've already been working on thinking about how to provide direct technical assistance is on the root cause analysis. We have some technical assistance and resources to really help support states in that process of thinking about what are the root causes to inequity in a state or region. Strategies, and again, to address those root causes, as well as helping states think about a logic model or a theory of action, and also helping states think about how to measure progress towards those particular root causes and strategies. Again, we've got some technical assistance materials, as well as some assistance available on how to provide or how to work with states on stakeholder engagement. And we'll talk about that. Ellen Sherritt's going to talk about that a little bit later. And as we had already talked about, reviewing draft state equity plans. So we're going to walk you through. We have a plethora of tools that are already ready to go that we're going to walk you through right now that we think can assist in the equity planning process in some way. So we'll walk you through each one of those now. And keep in mind, as we're going through these, we recognize there's a lot here. We can follow up with you about kind of comprehensively walking you through. But as you're listening to us talk about these, please also be thinking of places that we've missed or other things that we should be thinking about in this process. So I think I'm going to pass it over to Ellen.
So as Angela mentioned, we already have a number of tools that are available online to kickstart these conversations about equitable access. And the first one is a printable quick start guide. This is available to be downloaded from our website and used as a handout in meetings. It summarizes the key pieces of our existing Moving Toward Equity tool and highlights the opportunity that equitable access presents, as well as challenges faced by many school systems around equitable access and the approach taken in the Moving Toward Equity tool, including the identification of root causes that Angela spoke before jumping to developing strategies. We'll have available a root cause analysis workbook that Angela and Janice had spoken to. This workbook takes a state team through 8 key steps of identifying challenges around equitable access based on then thinking through the root causes in a systematic way where you really go deep into identifying the complete range of different root causes by first identifying the root causes that really come to mind, and then asking why are those problems, identifying further root causes in that way, and continuing to ask why until the full set of root causes are apparent. And then the third step is categorize those causes, and then we have a visualization tool to group to put those help create a theory of action about how those root causes contribute to the equitable access challenges faced in your states and regions. And then this also helps begin thinking through strategies that directly target those specific root causes and provides action steps as well as some initial steps for determining how to measure progress over time. We are very close to having available to you a comprehensive stakeholder engagement guide as well. We see the stakeholder engagement piece of equitable access planning as critically important and very important to think about at the earliest stages. So the stakeholder engagement guide includes information, tips, and advice planning authentic engagement that involves multiple stakeholders through the root causes, as well as helping to interpret the data and determine the most appropriate strategies for addressing equitable access. The material includes a communication guide that has information about developing key messages around the release of the data profiles, as well as key messages at each critical juncture in the equitable access planning process. It has information about local level stakeholders, since we recognize that local engagement is critical as well. And so there's information on adapting our guide into a statewide resource for local education agencies. And there's a lot more information as well, such as timelines, community tips, agendas, description of different meeting formats and different engagement strategies. So this is available by early November, but we do have a close to final draft at this point. And because it is so important to start early with stakeholder engagement, if this webinar is interested in taking a look, you can feel free to email me, and we can arrange that. Also happy to get on the phone with you at any point, as Angela had mentioned, to discuss this work with you. This of the Moving Toward Equity that suite of materials that we have, or very soon will have available, is a data review tool. So the guide date to chiefs is that the equity plans have to involve a consideration of root causes, stakeholder engagement, and the use of data. This data review tool helps states to think through the data profile that all states will be receiving, as well as additional data that states might have available to them. And it presents guiding questions about what story the data are telling, what data might be missing, what additional data collection efforts are taking place, and it provides and guiding questions around how best to display and communicate that data. So here are just a couple of examples, but they provide assistance on thinking through what data displays, such as maps or bar charts or other ways of communicating this complex data might be most appropriate in your state. We have already on the Moving Toward Equity website a host of information available to you to start this planning process. The Moving Toward Equity website is an online evolving repository of resources and strategies around equitable access. And it you through a 5-step process thinking about equitable access. The 5 steps are understanding the problem, setting priorities, raising awareness, taking action, and then measuring progress and adjusting strategies accordingly. The understanding the problem, for example, the first step is down into a few additional measuring equitable distribution, developing metrics, analyzing and reporting data. And so you can click on any of those for additional information. Under the action component as well, you can see on the right-hand side there's a bunch of different policy levers that you're able to click on to obtain additional resources and strategies around those policy levers. You can see at the bottom of your screen that the tool was designed to be used by multiple different types of stakeholders, district leaders, preparation programs, regional center staff, school leaders, and state education agency leaders. And so you can actually identify the stakeholder group you're from, and then the material that's presented, because there's so much of it, will be immediately confirmed for your stakeholder group specifically. Pass it back to Angela to describe a few more of our technical assistance resources.
Ellen. So just a couple more here to say, here are some additional resources that we have that we think are going to be important in the planning process. And the first is that we've been working a talent development framework. We think that because equitable access has so many different root and is really grounded in a strategy towards talent development, one of the tools that we have that we can share with you is a talent development framework that helps the state think about a comprehensive, coordinated approach to improving educator quality through talent development. So who we recruit into the profession, how we prepare and develop and support and retain them. So this can, for many states, be a place to start in terms of thinking about a framework or strategies for addressing inequitable access. We also have a blog that we wanted to share with you in case you weren't familiar with the blog on equitable access, and this might be a great place to take a look at some of the topics that we have here. We think they could be used in the stakeholder engagement process, sharing some of these blogs or stories about how to improve or address equitable access. This one is hot off the presses. We haven't sent out an email letting people know it's there, but it is on our website right now, and I think someone will hopefully get that link out to all participants. But in anticipation of the work around improving equitable access, one of the things we know from the research is that teaching conditions play a really significant role in recruiting and retaining effective educators. There's also a direct relationship with student achievement. So we have designed a professional learning module that will help states think about how to define and assess teaching conditions in its state and in its LEAs, how to use that information also to improve teaching conditions throughout the state and in LEAs. So if you're not familiar with our professional learning modules, they come, it's kind of grab and go materials. They come with a PowerPoint decks, facilitator's guide. They're designed with adult learning principle in mind, so they have a lot of hands-on activities, agendas. They're fully customizable, so you can take all of these materials and customize them to your state or your region. If you need Word copies of anything because you'd like to insert your own language that's very relevant to your context, we're happy to provide those. As well, if you'd like the staff to sit down and walk you through the customized this learning module, we're happy to do that as well. So we think that this is going to be a really great tool that states can and regions can use as they start to think about improving teaching conditions as one strategy for improving equitable access. I will say one last thing. Our partner in this work was the New Teacher Center. So we were lucky enough to partner with an organization that has a lot of experience doing measuring teaching conditions and using that data to improve teaching conditions at the state level. And you'll see that that work is informed by their experience and expertise as well. I'd also like to just remind some of you about the Innovation Station online resource. This is a central online location that has information and tools that are focused on recruiting and selecting excellent educators, retaining educators, rewarding and extending the reach. So we think this online tool will also be helpful as you begin to think about what we know about the research and strategies and resources that are available in these different areas. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, I believe, to Janice, who's going to talk about our upcoming convenings on equitable access.
Janice, you might be on mute.
I think I'm on mute, and I'm.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Angela. And I'm really excited about the information that we have to share about convenings, because we know sometimes it's really great to be able to sit down with your peers and learn from others about what they're doing, and also to find out from the group some additional tips. So we are planning 2 face-to-face convenings. We will be working with dates to first of all find out the information that's required for the plans in more detail once we get the FAQs and the data profiles from the U.S. Department of Education. And we have scheduled the first meeting to on February the 3rd and 4th, and that meeting is just prior to the Ted Andrews workshop that's sponsored by CCSSO and Tech, and they will be starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on the 4th and going to the week. And so we're just trying to save a lot of travel for people who are planning that workshop. And at that time, we will go through the requirements from the department, look at the data profiles. We'll also have a sample plan that states can look at and get ideas from, and then we'll also have some other information specifically on the components of the plan that Angela went over earlier. So if you want to hold that date, we anticipate that we will be able to invite 3 people from each to attend that meeting, and also are planning to have that in San Diego, California. So that's the information that we have right now, and more information will be forthcoming, but we just wanted to get that on your radar, and also for you to pencil in those dates and hold them for that gathering. The second convening, we don't have a specific date yet because we're still waiting to find out the actual deadline or the time that the plans have to be submitted. We know it's June, but we don't have a specific date. But we will be holding the second convening face-to-face for states to be able to bring a draft plan to a location where we will have people who have expertise in the components required in the plans, and also peers that can give feedback and suggestions on ways that the plan will be more clearly, or something that be added, or perhaps something that hasn't thought about. So that would give you an opportunity to do a test of your plan before it's submitted to the U.S. Department of Education. So those are 2 things that we are planning, and I think we're going to ask you a question in a minute about your feedback on that, and we really welcome that and would love any suggestions that you have to make sure that we meet the needs that people have during those convenings.
Thank you, Janice. At this point, we'd like to poll time. You can see on your screen. We'd like to see how likely it is that you or someone from your organization will attend the February convening. So if you can just check A, B, C, or D and then hit submit, give you about 15 or 20 seconds. And there is a bit of a lag in the time that it takes for the polling results to emerge after we close the poll. And so I'd like to remind you to please go ahead and use the chat box function. Send a message to all panelists. At the bottom, you'll see it says send to. And I'd love to know any ideas that you have for the webinars, for the convenings, and how we can make them most useful to you. And already, please also send us just information about, if you relate, who you are, what organization you represent, and any questions that you have or areas of challenges for you in this area, around equitable access. So we can hear that there are a great number of you who are either very likely or somewhat likely to attend that convening. So that's fantastic. We'll look forward to that. We'd like to introduce Laurel Horn to share a teacher's perspective on effective strategies for stakeholder engagement. Laurel is a member of the Center of Great Teachers and Leaders Practitioner Advisory Group. She's a 12th grade resource specialist with Summit Public Schools in San Jose, California, which she joined this year after 6 years teaching at Thurgood Marshall Academy Charter School in Washington, D.C. Served as a teaching policy fellow with Teach Plus, a leader for education equity summer policy and an advocacy fellow at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, the engagement teacher fellow with the Flamboyant Family Foundation, and a Kurt Hahn fellow with North Carolina Outward Bound. And she also was named finalist for 2014 Washington, D.C. Teacher of the Year. So she's very busy, and we're grateful to have her here to share her thoughts on effective stakeholder engagement.
Am I live?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. Well, thank you for including me in this discussion today. First, wanted to kind of ground my contribution by looking at one key piece that really can have a huge impact on the outcomes. Quickly looking at the high effective teacher incentive program, something that was implemented in DC, versus teacher turnaround teams, known as T3, which have been implemented in a number of cities, including Boston and Washington, D.C. And just thinking about like how one key difference and kind of the impact of stakeholder engagement can really have a huge impact on how some implemented with fidelity. So the high effective teacher incentive program gives incentives for a teacher who was rated as highly effective on the impact rating, gave both a monetary and housing incentive for a teacher to move to high-need schools. The turnaround teams also has an incentive of, you get a stipend, you join a cohort of leaders, teacher leaders who are all rated highly on teacher evaluation metrics. The key difference is it also can use existing talent within a school. This, I think, only because it had a huge impact on how those excellent teachers were received in the school setting. So in this amazing group of teacher leaders, some of whom had come from the I Need school already, and the other example where teachers were brought in from different parts of the district as the highly effective teacher cohort. And this had a huge impact just on kind of the overall culture of how those teachers were received and how the reforms and initiatives that they developed ended up being received and implemented. Just thinking about teacher turnaround teams is an initiative that was designed by For America fellows and it came out of exactly what's been gone over, of a root cause analysis with key stakeholders and looking at the landscape of what was existing. And schools, the highest need students, kind of how that access to excellent experienced teachers, how to improve that. By having this, huge teacher voice, they developed, strategy for creating a really high culture, high impact intervention. We're highly effective teacher incentive program has certainly amazing intention and did some of these great teachers into the school, but didn't have the same culture surrounding it, and therefore I think had a really different impact. Kind of what I view as the keys to engaging stakeholders, whether that's me as a teacher, a parent that I work with, the students, or the school leaders, is really sure that there's early involvement. So before a plan is even drafted, I think so often as a teacher, I'm given an opportunity to contribute. Once a plan has been developed, I'm given an opportunity to comment on it. And I'm not involved in the idea phase or in the vision setting phase. And I think that really inhibits the level of investment that I'm going to subsequently have in the implementation, because I don't have the opportunity to really provide meaningful feedback at an early stage of the process. The key thing is opportunities for meaningful contribution and collaboration. And this can come in several forms, and I'm sure all of the amazing resources that the GTL Center support this, and they have great kind of structures and strategies, but that's a focus group, or bringing in smaller groups of key stakeholders. Certainly town halls, you can get a lot of, kind of large for your buck, but also thinking about how can we get the different voices that we need to hear in a really strategic way. Investment in development and implementation. Kind of going to the earlier example of receiving a plan and getting to comment on it at the end. Or I feel like in the policy I've been involved in shaping, it's incredible to be able to be involved in providing feedback at each phase of the process and then getting the next iteration and really being included in that process, not just once, but continued investment and inclusion. And I think that that's key no matter who the stakeholder is to really keep them abreast. I think that has huge impact on the policy kind of implementation process, because people have been invested all the way along, and then it's going to be much more likely that at the end, once a plan has been developed, it's actually going to be implemented. Also really leveraging existing talent, networks, and partnerships. So when I was a family engagement fellow, we were designing a district-wide strategy and content for how to increase family engagement. Well, we partnered with the Sacramento Parent Home Visit Project because they had already done amazing work and had experience implementing at the district level. Leveraging those existing networks and bringing them on in this work, partners will both have a huge impact on the efficacy of the plan's implementation, because they can be key partners in kind of dissemination and bring in key people, but they also have expertise in what to include in that root cause analysis and in looking at the existing landscape of what's out there. And lastly is kind of this last piece of audience of, so often as a teacher, there are opportunities to contribute during the school day. And for me, I would love to be able to be involved on all different kinds of policy work and discussion. However, my primary role is to be in the classroom with my students and figuring out what are the ways that we can engage teachers at a time that works for them. Also for parents or whoever that stakeholder group is really thoughtful around the accessibility of when is this happening, and also where is it going to happen? Is it be in a central location where people can actually get to? And then also the content, taking into account the different needs of different stakeholders. Specifically when we're looking at this hope to promote equity, is being able to reach diverse stakeholders, who may have various levels of readability, may have different language needs. Really thinking about how can we make it accessible so that all voices are included who really should be, and so that nobody is excluded because of one of those actually really important pieces of diversity that we're trying to control for.
So much, Laura. That is just helpful all around, and we're so took time out of your school in the middle of the school day. So thank you to you and to your principal for you to have that kind of flexibility to join us. We would like to introduce Brian Hassel. Brian is a Center on Great Teachers and Leaders project lead and the co-director of Public Impact, and he'll be leading a 15 to 20-minute needs assessment session where we can really get a stronger sense of the challenge areas that you're facing and how the Center on Great Teachers and Leaders can help you the most. So Brian, take it away.
All right, Ellen, I think you might unmute me on your end.
I can hear you.
Great. Well, this segment, our goal is really to hear from you on the webinar about what you see as the greatest needs states will have as they develop their equity plans, and also what kinds of assistance from the GTL Center and others you think would be the most valuable. And look at that in a couple of different ways. First, I'd like to hear your thoughts about what parts of developing a state educator equity plan do you anticipate being the most challenging and why? Now, we already told you about this earlier in the webinar, and the one that got the most votes within that poll was the root cause analysis. 10 of you said you thought that would be the most difficult, challenging part. Look to the bottom of your equity challenges. Some of the other items that spiked were generating strategies to address those challenges, ongoing monitoring and support of how you're doing with equity in your state. The other items on the list that got fewer votes got some. Every one of those got at least one vote. Stakeholder engagement, defining teacher quality, also developing your action for the equity work. So what I'd really like to do now is ask for you to elaborate on your votes. What specifically were you thinking about when you said you thought, for example, root cause analysis was going to be the most challenging? And also, what kind of support do you think would be used to states on the thing that you flagged as being the most challenging? Muted, so to chime in on this, you need to use the chat box. So the blue stripe on the right side of the web screen that says chat. If you click the arrow to open that, you'll see a place to enter some text. Choose all panelists from the drop-down, and then submit a question or a comment will come into us. Again, that's the all panelists item from the drop-down, and then submit chat, and we'll see that. And again, hearing about is what specifically do you think will be challenging about these components of the equity plan you said would be challenging? Why is that going to be hard? And what kind of support do you think would be most useful to states? And we're giving folks a chance to submit that. I'd be interested in hearing from some of the other panelists about their answers to this question. I mean, root cause analysis, for example, stood out as the biggest challenge. In our experience working with states, why does this seem so hard? And also, what resources already exist in the GTL tool set to help with this? Any thoughts from my co-panelists?
And I'll say that we have led a root cause analysis with a number of states as part of the State Consortium for Educator Effectiveness that the Council on Chief State School Officers hosts. And it was found to be a really productive experience. I think in our busy jobs and busy lives, we just don't have that time to really reflect on the root causes. And it's just such a natural just want to immediately think about those different strategies that are out there. There are so many innovative and exciting strategies to think about, but to avoid having the strategy be potentially disconnected from the real cause and therefore not as effective as it could be. It is so important to just take that time. And, it's hard to do. You have to proactively determine that your team is going to set aside an hour or a few hours to have that conversation.
So this is I don't know if you've seen in the Q&A box, we have some questions from some people. Is everyone else able to see those?
We have some questions, and so I'll go ahead and share those questions with the panelists and with the audience. And so one question is from Ana Sol Gutierrez, which is the challenge of recruiting, hiring bilingual teachers, especially Spanish, English-speaking teachers who can meet the needs of growing Latino students and their language development challenges. We'll have a question from Heather Hoke about the issue of rural schools and lack of teachers to fill specific positions, which could be a root cause. And also were some questions, which I think we'll postpone for the Q&A section of this webinar, just about timelines, how to sign up for the February meeting, and whether funded technical assistance organizations are going to be able to attend the February meeting.
So we'll turn to those questions. In the meantime, if you have other chats about what you think will be challenging about fulfilling these plans out, and also what kind of support you think would be useful, please enter into the chat box now. And we have the rural schools, the issue of bilingual teachers. I think both of these are addressed in some ways in the materials that exist, but I think it's a good call to us to really double down on those topics as we think about providing support, whatever we have in our minds as we move forward with developing these materials. Please enter them in the chat box and submit them, and we'll have them report out as we hear from you about that. While you're doing that, I'd like to go on to a different question, a different polling question to get some more thoughts from you, which is not so much the parts of the equity plan as the different kinds of strategies that states are likely to be focusing on. Which ones of those do you think states are well prepared already to address? They already are in good shape, and kind of by omission, which ones do you think states will need a little help on? So we put up a list here under the polling stripe, and what I do is check all of the ones that you think states are already well prepared to address. They have them and then you can check as many as you think apply, and we'll see what kind of results we get from that. And this, again, will help us focus our development on areas that are most in need from people. So please fill out the poll. We'll give you 20 seconds or so to do that. We've had one chat has come in asking how will states connect state plans to district initiatives in this area, and that's a great question, because states, you're in a unique position to plan, set things in motion, set goals at a state level, and set initiatives going. But ultimately, it's really districts and schools that determine equity and access to effective teachers, and so that's a critical thing for us all to keep in mind as we develop these plans. Another comment has come in about collecting agreements. How do they fit into these questions? Providing assistance to states about how to work within those constraints, or be creative about how to move forward in that area. So that's another good one to have in mind. The poll has ended. Let's see what kind of answers came through in a minute to the question about strategies states are well prepared to answer. I don't know from the panelists, are there, in your work with states, on this list of strategies? Are there some that you think are already spiking as being a particular need on the part of states? Anything that jumps out at you? Poll results here that a few things really jump to the top. Appropriate standards for licensure, so the entry criteria for becoming in the first place, ongoing professional learning, and effective teacher and leader evaluation are also both very high up there on the list. But like the first question we asked, you can see all of these items are getting votes. These are where people think the states are already doing pretty well, but there's a lot that aren't. So I think we have a lot of areas for support left on the table here. Any thoughts from the panelists on areas where you think we see the most need? Or field about from webinar participants about what sort of strategies you think states will need the most help addressing and why, what kinds of help they might need.
We'll continue to see, this is Angela again, I continue to see in the chat box, again, people pointing out that rural is going to be a particular, and I think we've seen that from the past work that we've done at the center, that there are just very specific challenges in rural areas. Things that we hope to do at the center, and also working with those of you who are on the phone, is to really connect to what those resources and strategies are, because rural communities do face very distinct challenges that other places don't face.
Great. I'll continue to put ideas into the chat box about this question of strategies. Love to hear more from you about that, so we can focus our resources where they're most needed. Let's turn to another poll. I'd like to put the about what concerns people all the most about the equity planning process. When you think of the states you work with or the state that you're in, and the job of getting this equity plan done, what concerns you the most? Is it the timeline of getting it done? Is it your state's capacity to develop a meaningful plan? Is it the question of engaged agreement? Is it of the plan, or is it something else altogether? If you click polling stripe, you can indicate which you think concern you the most about the planning process. And one of the questions in the box that you said we'd come back to in the future is about the timeline. And I don't know if you want to say anything about that at this point, since that's one of the questions on this poll, but
sure.
What's our current thought about the timeline?
And Janice, I want to chime in here as well, but as Janice had mentioned, the overall deadline for submitting plans has been extended from April 2015 to June 2015. We, in our stakeholder engagement guide, do spell out a timeline that might be considered, and it has stakeholder engagement really beginning ASAP. As Laurel had alluded to, you really can't start soon enough in terms of getting stakeholders to provide their initial ideas before actually reacting to a draft plan. We at the center wouldn't want to be overly prescriptive in terms of setting a line for developing those draft plans, but the sooner the better. Like Angela had mentioned, we're available to review those draft plans, but if we get 50 draft plans in May, our ability to review them in a meaningful way would be difficult.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to jump in here, and then Janice may want to jump in as well too. So I think that the timing leeway when we heard that the deadline was going to be pushed back till June. But there are also some other pieces of information that we anticipate states are going to need. So some of the FAQs from the Department of Education that may not come out until the fall. Janice had already mentioned the educator equity profiles with some of the OCR data come out until the fall as well. So I think in trying to plan a convening, we were trying to be sensitive to when the relevant pieces of information that states may need to move the process forward would be available, as well as thinking about the stakeholder engagement process. So there's some, and we've outlined some of those kind of pre-readiness steps, things to start getting ready as you are going to want to start to engage your stakeholders, and also as regional centers and state agency staff are going to want to start pulling the right people together to begin to see what you have and review that data, potentially review your old equity plans. We think people are going to need some time to do that, which is why we push the first convening until early 2015. But having said that, we're only ready if any regional center or state would like us to come in and provide some technical assistance. We're certainly ready to help do that with you. One more question that's on here. We can go through and see what some of the other ones are, but I think there are some questions about how to sign up. And I would say stay tuned. We're just really at the initial phases. We just wanted to get it on people's calendars so you know that this is coming. If it's something that you're highly interested in, save the time. And there was also a question about, can other federally funded TA providers also attend the February meeting? We will be reaching out to all of our partners in the Comprehensive Center Network to have this conversation, and also to involve you in thinking about the planning of this as well. So all of that is it's coming down the pike. We just wanted this kind of as a sneak preview to say this is something that we're thinking about, that there will be this support available, but we will be reaching out to you with more information shortly.
So I'm looking for results when we have to do with what concerns you the most about developing these plans, and definitely the number one item there is state capacity to develop a meaningful plan that stands out with implementation, stakeholder engagement, and the timeline also getting some votes, but state capacity really jumping out at the top. And one thing that would be helpful to us in your chats is if you could give your sense, if you were one of those 10, of what do you mean by that? State capacity is a broad concept. What are your specific concerns? What kind of capacity do you think states make that they need assistance with, whether that's having the data they need to understand the problem, whether that's analyzing that data or moving on from there? What are the capacities you think would be worth talking about as we develop support for this work, and to see what your chats are about that? Imagine there's concerns across a lot of different areas of capacity, and gearing up to support that is our top priority. So, Anne, I think if we see some other answers coming in on that question, we can address those at that time. It may be useful at this point just to throw it open for other questions, or see some questions that are already on the board about the process in general, and get into a more general Q&A. So I'll turn it back.
Somebody asked the question about, I'm seeing in the chat box, about the February meeting is attached to which meeting. Do you mind reading which meeting that is again?
Sure. It's the NASTEC and CCSSO meeting. It's actually called the Ted Andrews Workshop, and it's NASTEC, if you're not familiar with that organization, it's the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification. But that they held an annual meeting in that time of year, and it's some same group of people that would be working on the equity plans that were attending that meeting. And so we're just trying to cut down the amount of time that people would have to be away from their job to be able to attend just in 1 week all the different aspects of their work.
also got a question in about whether we're able to display all of the questions that participants are submitting to us, and we are not able to do that with the functionality very easily, but we'll just continue to say them out loud, and hopefully that will suffice. We did get a comment in about state capacity, which is from Susan Henry about states working hard to adjust to reduced resources post-race to the top. It's a need, low resources time for SEA's post-race to the top. We certainly sympathize, and we hope we can help in terms of capacity, and that's why we've been trying to develop these resources. I'll add that the resources that we described earlier are all meant to be modifiable for use in the district context. So we have our data review tool. There's also questions about districts using health or equitable access store and discuss the data that they have available, and that they're still in the process of collecting to really coherent story about what equitable access looks like in the district context. Like the stakeholder engagement guide has information specifically for adapting our resource into an LEA-specific resource. So the root cause analysis tool also has a stakeholder-specific root cause analysis tool that can be used at the LEA level. So we're hoping that you can take our material and use them yourselves, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
And another comment I see here on where people are saying kind of what they see as some challenges. I don't know if we mentioned this before, but is in SEA leadership with November elections is going to be a challenge regarding capacity and the timing of these. I don't know, Janice, if that's something you want to say, because I know that this is right in your what you've been thinking about on a variety of issues, but you want to speak to that, and then if others have ideas about or concerns about how this may play into this planning process as well.
And the issue again was the limited capacity of states. Is that what you said?
It was the potential changing of SEA chiefs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons why we requested the delay in the timeline for submitting the proposals is because we are anticipating that there will be significant change in state leadership as a result of either the elections or the appointments that officials will make. And so we thought it was important to give anyone new come into that role an opportunity to be able to use position to make this a part of the state, and also to be able to have the stakeholder engagement that will be to inform the plan that the states will be getting. So that was really the main reason that we made the request of the department to extend the deadline. But it, the amount of time, even with it extended, is still limited, and there's still a lot of work to do. And especially, I think, with the profiles and thinking about what metrics that states are going to use to be able to identify where the inequities are in their systems, and then to determine what the causes are, and to think about the plans. And so I think that there will also be a need to get in from their districts about this work, and how they are applying it, because there are a lot of differences, I think, within schools as well as within districts, and then across districts. And if you see it different ways, I think you get different views of what exactly is going on. And I know Tennessee has done some work in the area that I was very fascinated by in terms of looking at it and the difference that they do slide data. So all of those are definitely going to be challenges for the states in terms of their capacity to do this work. But I believe from the conversations that we've had is that the states see this as an opportunity also for them to be able to think about work in a comprehensive and coherent manner. And it helped them to pull together all the different policies and processes and procedures that they've been working on for the past few years, and to making it more manageable at the school and district level. And that answers the question.
Janice.
Thank you. We have another that has come in from Shireen Donaldson. How are states defining equity? Are states being provided technical assistance with defining equity as it relates to determining equitable access? We also have a comment from Anna Salgetter's lack of interest and understanding of local hiring needs to ensure equity and increase diversity of the teacher corps. Angela or Janice or Brian, do you want to comment on the question about defining equity and technical assistance available around defining equity?
I'll be able to take the first step and would hope that Angela and Brian will chime in as well. Understanding is that the department is going to leave the determination of how equity is defined to the states to determine where their greatest needs are, and to look at it and using also defining which metrics they're going to use. So in other words, if you use HQT data, you might have a totally different view of it than if you used some of your growth measures or other evaluation data. And so I think all of that will be that states will define using also their theory of action. How they define that theory of action will help determine how they're going to do this. Some states may start defining it one way and then move to another way as they get more data and information that they can use to help determine more accurately what their most the problems are that they're having and how to address those.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I don't think there's not going to be any new regulations, so I think the FAQs will provide some strong ideas and best practices, as well as encourage states to take the opportunity to leverage some of their existing initiatives, particularly around teacher evaluation. But I don't think there's going to be any requirements beyond what's already in the regulations.
Next question that you brought up, Ellen, was about the local hiring practices and the needs. That's one of the things I mean when I say that states and are going to need the input from districts to understand that, and also to look at what some of the practices are and then get some strategies that they might use to address those. But that may also be a way to help determine where some of the inequities is to think those areas where they have great difficulty in attracting and retaining to those schools. So I think that's going to be an important part of it, is to get down to those root causes and understanding of what's happening in the local areas.
The other thing I'll add here, I know we haven't really discussed it on this webinar, but I think in terms of supporting states as they move forward with this process, is that there was the Office of Civil Rights also recently sent out a letter to state chiefs about access to equal access to resources, and so there may be some information and language in there that may be relevant for states to start thinking about in this planning piece as well, because certainly they talk about one resource being effective educators, specifically effective teachers. That's maybe something else for states and regions to be thinking about and referencing in terms of preparing for this process as well.
Great. We have two more questions that have come in. First is, will there be model plans or minimum standards of adequacy for assessing state and local educator equity plans? How has evaluate plan adequacy. Will the Office of Civil Rights data be used for all states? That's the first or set of questions. The second question is about how are we engaging equity assistance centers in this? And Jan, do you want to take a stab at either of those two questions?
Off, and then I am happy to have my other panelists jump in. We as technical assistance providers, we're federally funded. Quite about how the department will be assessing equity plans, anything specific like that. I don't have any information to pass on to you about that yet. We haven't received any information, and I assume that in technical, as federally funded comprehensive centers, will probably at the same time. Again, Janice or Brian may have some additional information on this, but I know from the center's perspective, some of the work that we're doing in collaboration is to develop a sample equity plan, but as a resource and a tool. We think that will be helpful, both and a sample plan that we think will be helpful just in that planning process. And as Janice said earlier, we hope to have a convening before the plans are due, where we can provide state teams with access to experts who can weigh in and help strengthen their plans as well. We do anticipate being involved in any approval process of state plans. With the second question, and then I'll pass it on to others about equity assistance centers, we are definitely working with our comprehensive center. If we haven't reached out to you yet, we will be reaching out to you shortly. This webinar is kind of just our kickoff of the conversation. I know we've had some conversations with equity assistance centers and just letting them know that we're beginning to engage on this work, asking for partners in this work. This is incredibly important work and such a large area of work. We welcome as many partners in this work as possible. So if we haven't yet reached out to you, we anticipate doing so, but please do not hesitate to reach out to us as well and let us know how we can also partner with you in this work.
And I would add a couple of things on the model plans. There'll be the sample plan from the center, but also as states begin to work on their plans, we'll be able to facilitate sharing of ideas and sharing of models that are coming from different states, and you can learn a lot from each other on this front. And then as far as data goes, the OCR data, we think that's just a starting point for states to use in thinking about equity. It gives them some information, some insight, and it's certainly what the federal government has in its own coffers, but states usually have and districts have access to much richer data, and we have provided some guidance about how you can really delve into that and learn much about equity within your state than you'll get just from the OCR data. So starting point, but not the end point of really understanding root causes and issues.
One final polling question we can pull up. To gauge whether you have been involved at this point in the planning process, by chance held or attended a meeting already on the topic. Have you developed a plan of action to begin working on it? There's obviously many other ways that you could have been involved other than those, and so we'd love if you could add to the chat box whether maybe you've reviewed materials or participated in the development or implementation of your prior equity plan back in 2007. That's useful information for us as we plan our support. getting some feedback in chat box. Trying to schedule times with, so some regional centers already are receiving requests from states to provide assistance with the plan, and other regional centers are trying to schedule times with the state education agency and to become familiar with the requirements and resources. That's great. Okay. Participants have held meetings about equitable access. Give folks another minute or so to submit any additional questions that you might have in the chat box. If you have any kind of final comments or thoughts about issues related to equitable access that have not yet come up on the webinar that you'd like to share with participants.
Well, this is kind of a plea for those of you who are on the webinar. Again, if there are things that we should really be thinking about, the resources and technical assistance to support and regional centers in this work. And if it's obviously past this webinar, do not hesitate to reach out to us if you have any kind of final thoughts about, you really need to be thinking about it. I know several people have said, and hiring teachers who work with special populations of students is going to continue to be a challenge. If it is helpful for us to be pulling together, and I know we have some, but not a lot, some strategies that we can highlight. And I know, as Brian said, really sharing other resources from different states and districts. We're happy to do that, but want to hear more from you about where we should be focusing kind of our energy and time and resources in supporting you all in this really important work. So if you have thoughts, please make sure to send them to us, but do not hesitate after this webinar to reach out to us as well.
Before we turn to the other presenters, we did get a couple more comments in. One is about one state is scheduling a meeting with the state superintendent to discuss the ways that that SCA staff can help develop the plans in conjunction with the regional centers. It's great. And we have a question about whether the presenters will be available for local town hall meetings with parents and stakeholders, and if so, who they should call. I'll say you can feel free to email or call me. This is Ellen Sherritt with any such questions, and I'll put my number and in the chat right now for all attendees. The presenter to respect availability for that type of technical assistance presentation.
Well, I think again, just as with all the technical assistance needs, please reach out to us, whether it's through Ellen or others. We are really trying to pull all of our resources together at the center and working with, again, our great partners at CCSSO and Public Impact to make sure that we're there to support you in this work. So you can always, if we can help you out, we will, or just being able to connect you with others who may be able to provide that support. We're happy to do that as well.
Great. It seems like Brian, if you don't have anything else to add to that, we ahead and close this webinar. I'd like to thank everybody very much for taking time out of your day to join us. And, someone just did send something in the chat box about my email address, which I realized I mistyped. Let me just put that in again, and we will webinar a few minutes early. But my email is ESHERRATT Sending it right now. So I'd like to thank our presenters very much, Brian Hassel, Janice Poda, Angela Minichi, and Lou Horn, who I know had to step off a few minutes early to get back to her class. And thank you all for joining us today. We look forward to working with many of you. Thank you.